The first spark. The sun was setting over the small suburban neighborhood where 11-year-old Tia Johnson lived. Inside her modest home, the hum of her mother's favorite jazz record filled the air, blending with the smell of baked mac and cheese wafting from the kitchen. Tia sat cross-legged in the living room, watching a televised ballet performance. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of awe and determination as the dancers moved gracefully across the stage, their bodies telling stories without words. "Tia, dinner's ready," her mother called, but the girl barely heard. She was too enraptured by the beauty of the performance, imagining herself twirling under the bright stage lights. "Earth to Tia," her younger brother, Jaden, teased, waving a hand in front of her face. Tia blinked and grinned sheepishly. "Coming," she replied, reluctantly tearing her eyes away from the screen. She grabbed her plate and joined her family at the table, but her mind was still filled with pirouettes and arabesques. That evening, as the family gathered in the living room after dinner, Tia spoke up. "Mama, I want to dance, like the women on TV. Can I take ballet lessons?" Her parents exchanged a look. Her father, a hard-working mechanic, frowned slightly. "It's not cheap, Tia," he said carefully, his voice tinged with concern. "And it's a lot of commitment." Tia's heart sank, but before she could respond, her mother chimed in. "Let's not dismiss it so quickly. If it's something she truly loves, we'll find a way." Her father sighed, but he smiled. "All right, kiddo. If you're serious, we'll look into it." Tia's face lit up, and she threw her arms around her parents. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." A week later, Tia found herself clutching her mother's hand as they entered Miss Lily's dance studio. The studio smelled faintly of polish and lavender, the scent mingling with the sound of soft piano music playing from within. Tia's heart raced as she peeked through the doorway into the classroom. Young girls in pink tights and leotards moved in sync under the watchful eye of Miss Lily, a graceful woman with silver-streaked hair tied in a neat bun. "Come on, sweetheart," her mother urged gently, nudging her toward the entrance. "You can do this." Tia hesitated, her small fingers tightening around her mother's hand. "What if I'm not good enough?" she whispered. Her mother knelt down to meet her eyes. "You'll never know until you try, and no matter what, I'm proud of you for being brave." Bolstered by her mother's words, Tia took a deep breath and stepped inside. The polished wood floor gleamed under the studio lights, and as Tia joined the other girls, a sense of calm washed over her. She mimicked the other children as they stretched and warmed up, the initial awkwardness giving way to a tentative confidence. Miss Lily began the class with basic positions. "First position," she said, demonstrating with perfect poise. "Now your turn." Tia followed, her movements tentative but precise. As the class continued, it became clear that Tia had something special. While the other children giggled and stumbled, Tia moved with an innate sense of rhythm and grace. Her arms arched fluidly, and her feet found their placement, as though guided by an invisible thread. Miss Lily's sharp eye caught on Tia's movements. She paused, her gaze lingering on the young girl. "What's your name?" she asked kindly. "Tia," she answered, her voice small but steady. "Well, Tia, you have a gift," Miss Lily said, smiling warmly. "Keep at it, and you'll go far." The words made Tia's heart soar. As the class ended, and she joined her mother in the lobby, she couldn't contain her excitement. "Mama, did you see me?" Miss Lily said I was good. Her mother laughed, her eyes shining with pride. "I saw. Sweetheart, you were amazing." Tia's passion for dance took root that day. Over the next several weeks, she practiced diligently, her small body moving with newfound purpose. Her parents, recognizing the joy dance brought her, made sacrifices to ensure she could continue lessons. Her father picked up extra shifts at work, and her mother juggled their family schedule to fit in Tia's growing commitment to dance. One afternoon, as Tia twirled around the living room, her younger brother Jaden watched with a mix of admiration and mischief. "You're pretty good, Tia," he said, trying to mimic her movements. but I bet I can do a better spin." Tia laughed, pulling him into an impromptu dance battle. The two siblings spun and leaped across the room, their giggles filling the air. Their mother peeked in from the kitchen, a smile tugging at her lips as she watched them. By the time Tia collapsed onto the couch, breathless and happy, she knew one thing for certain. Dancing wasn't just a hobby. It was a part of her soul. But as Tia's love for dance blossomed, so did the challenges. The world of competitive dance was demanding, and at times, cruel. When Tia was accepted into Miss Thompson's prestigious dance studio, she thought it was the next step in achieving her dreams. However, the environment was nothing like the nurturing space Miss Lily had created. Miss Thompson was a stern woman with an unforgiving demeanor. Her standards were exacting, her critiques sharp. Tia did her best to keep up, pushing herself harder with each passing day. But as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to form in her once unshakable confidence. One day, during a grueling practice session, Miss Thompson's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Tia, you're too heavy for these movements," she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. "If you can't keep up, you'll drag the whole team down." The room fell silent. Tia's classmates avoided her gaze, their faces etched with discomfort. Tia's cheeks burned with humiliation, tears threatening to spill as she forced herself to continue. But inside, something broke. The joy she once felt in dance was overshadowed by the weight of Miss Thompson's words. That night, as Tia lay in bed clutching her worn ballet slippers, she wondered if she was truly cut out for this world. The spark that had ignited her passion flickered dimly, teetering on the edge of extinguishment. Yet deep within her, a quiet voice whispered a defiant promise: "Prove them wrong." This would be the beginning of a journey that would challenge Tia in ways she could never have imagined. Through pain and perseverance, she would not only rediscover her love for dance, but also spark a movement that would challenge the very fabric of the competitive dance world. The breaking point. The glow of the morning sun filtered through Tia's bedroom window, casting soft patterns on the walls. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at her ballet slippers. They had always been a source of comfort, symbols of her love for dance, and the joy it brought her. But today, they felt like weights tethering her to a world that had begun to feel hostile. Downstairs, her mother hummed as she prepared breakfast, the aroma of pancakes wafting through the air. Normally, Tia would rush down, eager to devour a stack with extra syrup. But today, her appetite was non-existent. She pulled on her practice clothes and headed out the door without a word. At Miss Thompson's studio, the air was thick with tension. The upcoming regional competition loomed over the dancers, their movements sharp with determination and fear. Tia joined the others at the bar, her reflection staring back at her from the long mirrors that lined the room. The girl in the mirror looked tired, her once bright eyes dulled by weeks of self-doubt. Miss Thompson clapped her hands. "All right, girls, let's start with the routine from the top," she barked, her tone devoid of warmth. The music began, and Tia moved through the familiar steps, her body straining to keep up. Every leap felt heavier, every pirouette more unsteady. As she attempted a particularly challenging sequence, her foot slipped, and she stumbled, nearly crashing into the girl next to her. Miss Thompson's voice sliced through the room. "Stop," she snapped, her eyes narrowing on Tia. "What was that? You're supposed to be a dancer, not a bumbling elephant." The other girls froze, their gazes darting between Miss Thompson and Tia. Tia's cheeks flushed as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Miss Thompson folded her arms, her expression cold. "Sorry doesn't cut it. If you don't shape up, you're off the team. We can't afford to have you dragging us down at regionals." The words hit Tia like a punch to the stomach. She nodded silently, biting the inside of her cheek to keep from crying. As the music resumed and the other dancers moved gracefully around her, Tia felt like a ghost in the room, visible but insignificant. That evening, Tia sat on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by crumpled tissues. Her mother knocked softly on the door before entering, her eyes filled with concern. "Tia, honey, talk to me," she said gently, sitting down beside her. "What's going on?" Tia hesitated, then the dam broke. The words spilled out in a torrent as she recounted Miss Thompson's harsh criticisms and the mounting pressure she felt. She said, "I'm too fat," Tia choked out, tears streaming down her face. "That I'll ruin everything for the team." Her mother's face darkened, a rare flash of anger crossing her usually calm demeanor. "She said that to you?" she asked, her voice trembling with controlled fury. Tia nodded, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "Maybe she's right," she whispered. "Maybe I'm not good enough." Her mother cupped Tia's face, forcing her to meet her gaze. "Listen to me, Tia," she said firmly. "You are more than good enough. That woman has no right to talk to you like that." Tia's voice broke. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace. "You don't have to make any decisions right now," she said softly. "But whatever you choose, we'll support you." For the next few days, Tia avoided the studio. She stayed in her room, staring out the window as doubt and fear consumed her. Her father tried to coax her out with promises of her favorite ice cream, and Jaden attempted to make her laugh with his goofy impressions, but nothing worked. Late one night, unable to sleep, Tia picked up her phone and began scrolling through social media. She stumbled upon a video of a dancer who looked nothing like the thin, willowy figures she was used to seeing. The woman was strong and curvy, her movements powerful and unapologetic. Tia watched, mesmerized, as the dancer moved with a confidence and grace that defied every stereotype she had been taught. Beneath the video, a caption read, "Dance is for everyone. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The words lingered in Tia's mind long after the video ended. She began searching for more videos, finding countless dancers who defied the rigid standards she had grown to resent. Each story she read filled her with a mixture of awe and inspiration. These dancers had faced rejection and criticism, yet they had persevered, refusing to let others define their worth. For the first time in weeks, a spark of hope ignited in Tia's heart. The next morning, Tia approached her parents at the breakfast table. "I want to dance again," she said, her voice steady, "but not at Miss Thompson's studio." Her parents exchanged a look, relief and pride evident in their expressions. "We'll help you find a new studio," her mother said with a smile, "one that appreciates you for who you are." Over the next week, the family visited several dance schools, each offering a different atmosphere. Some felt just as rigid as Miss Thompson's studio, while others seemed promising but lacked the warmth Tia was searching for. Just as she began to lose hope, they stepped into Miss Chen's dance academy. The studio walls were adorned with photos of dancers of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation as a class finished, the students chatting animatedly as they packed up their bags. Tia watched in awe as Miss Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes, offered encouragement to a young dancer struggling with a routine. When Miss Chen approached Tia, her smile was warm and inviting. "Welcome," she said. "Are you ready to dance?" That afternoon, Tia joined her first class at Miss Chen's studio. The atmosphere was unlike anything she had experienced before. The students were supportive, the instruction was constructive, and for the first time in a long while, Tia felt like she belonged. As the class ended, Miss Chen pulled Tia aside. "You have a gift," she said, echoing the words Tia had once heard from Miss Liley. "But more importantly, you have a story to tell. Dance is about more than technique. It's about expressing who you are." Tia felt a lump rise in her throat. For the first time, she realized that her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, as Tia stood in front of her mirror, she didn't see the flaws Miss Thompson had pointed out. She saw a dancer, a strong, resilient, and determined young girl who was ready to reclaim her passion. The road to resilience. The first day at Miss Chen's dance academy had been like stepping into a new world. The warmth and encouragement in the studio were a stark contrast to the cold, critical environment Tia had endured under Miss Thompson. Yet, despite the positive atmosphere, Tia's self-doubt lingered. She carried the scars of Miss Thompson's words, and they had become an unrelenting whisper in the back of her mind. "You're too fat. You'll drag the team down." These words echoed in her thoughts every time she faced the mirror. Miss Chen, however, was no stranger to nurturing wounded spirits. She noticed the hesitancy in Tia's movements, the way she held back as if expecting judgment. One afternoon, after class, Miss Chen approached her. "Tia," she said gently, "may I have a word?" Tia nodded, her heart sinking. Was she about to hear the same criticisms, cloaked in kinder words? Miss Chen led her to the corner of the studio, where two chairs faced each other. She gestured for Tia to sit down. "I see the potential in you," Miss Chen began, her tone as calm as the breeze. "But I also see that you're holding something back. Do you want to talk about it?" Tia hesitated, but something in Miss Chen's kind eyes gave her the courage to speak. The words tumbled out, the cutting remarks, the humiliation, the fear of being judged for her body rather than her talent. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, and her voice wavered with the weight of months of bottled-up emotions. Miss Chen listened without interruption. When Tia finished, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, Miss Chen reached across and placed a hand over hers. "Tia," she said softly, "what you've been through is not your fault. But I want you to know something. You are more than enough. Your body, your talent, your spirit, they are all part of what makes you unique. Dance isn't about fitting into a mold. It's about breaking free from it." Miss Chen's words stayed with Tia as she attended class after class. Slowly, she began to shed the weight of her insecurities, focusing instead on rediscovering her love for movement. Miss Chen introduced exercises designed not only to build physical strength, but also to encourage self-expression. "Tell a story with your dance," she would say. "Let your movements speak for you." One day, Miss Chen assigned the students a creative exercise. They were to choreograph a short routine inspired by a personal experience. Tia's heart raced at the thought. She had spent so long trying to silence the voice of self-doubt that the idea of confronting it through dance felt both terrifying and liberating. That evening, Tia sat in her room, the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminating the pages of her notebook. She scribbled down ideas, the memories of her journey swirling in her mind, the joy of her first dance class, the pain of Miss Thompson's criticisms, the strength she was beginning to reclaim. Gradually, these emotions took shape in her choreography. When she practiced in front of the mirror, her movements felt raw and unfiltered. Every leap and spin carried a piece of her story. There were moments of vulnerability when her arms drooped like wilted flowers and moments of defiance when her steps were sharp and purposeful. By the time she finished her routine, Tia felt as though she had poured her soul into the dance. The next day, as the class gathered to present their routines, Tia's nerves were a storm inside her chest. She watched as her classmates performed, each routine a window into their hearts. When Miss Chen called her name, Tia swallowed hard and stepped into the center of the room. The music began, a haunting melody that mirrored the complexity of her emotions. Tia closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. Her body moved instinctively, the choreography flowing as if it were an extension of her thoughts. As she danced, she relived her journey, the pain of rejection, the quiet nights of self-doubt, and the spark of hope that Miss Chen had reignited. When the final notes of the music faded, Tia stood frozen in her ending pose, her chest heaving with exertion. For a moment, the studio was silent. Then, a wave of applause erupted from her classmates, their cheers filling the space. Miss Chen approached her, her eyes glistening. That, Miss Chen said softly, was breathtaking. Tia left the studio that day with a newfound sense of purpose. She knew she still had a long way to go, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. Dance was no longer just about perfecting her technique or earning approval. It was about reclaiming her voice and using it to inspire others. The regional competition loomed on the horizon, and Miss Chen announced that Tia would be performing a solo. The news both thrilled and terrified her. Memories of her last competition under Miss Thompson resurfaced, bringing with them the sting of humiliation. But this time, she was determined to prove something, not to the judges, not to her peers, but to herself. Miss Chen worked closely with Tia to refine her routine. The process was grueling, but it was also empowering. Tia discovered muscles she didn't know she had, pushing her body to new limits. Her stamina improved, her movements became more precise, and her confidence grew with each practice session. As the day of the competition approached, Tia's family rallied around her. Her mother helped her prepare her costume, sewing intricate embellishments onto the fabric. Her father spent hours making a sign that read, "Team Tia, dance from the heart." Even Jaden contributed by blasting Tia's music in the living room and attempting to mimic her choreography, much to everyone's amusement. The night before the competition, Tia stood in front of her mirror, her reflection a mixture of nerves and determination. She adjusted her costume and practiced her routine one last time. When she finished, she stared at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You can do this." The morning of the competition was a whirlwind. The venue buzzed with energy, dancers warming up in every corner, their costumes shimmering under the lights. Tia found a quiet spot backstage, closing her eyes to steady her breathing. Miss Chen joined her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Remember," she said, "you've already won by making it here. Now go out there and tell your story." As Tia stepped onto the stage, the lights dimmed and the audience fell silent. She took her starting position, the familiar strains of her music beginning to fill the auditorium. Her heart pounded, but as the first notes enveloped her, she let go of her fear. Each movement was a reflection of her journey, her arms reaching skyward in moments of hope, her steps faltering, and then recovering in moments of resilience. She danced not just for herself, but for every young girl who had ever felt like she wasn't enough. The audience watched in awe as Tia's story unfolded through her movements, her passion lighting up the stage. When the final notes faded, Tia held her ending pose, her chest heaving with exertion. For a moment, there was silence. Then the auditorium erupted into applause, the sound washing over her like a wave. As Tia bowed, tears streamed down her face. She had done it. She had faced her fears and reclaimed her love for dance. And in that moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Breaking chains. The applause from the regional competition still rang in Tia's ears as she stepped off the stage, her legs trembling from both exertion and adrenaline. Her family rushed to greet her, their faces lit with pride. Her mother wrapped her in a tight hug, whispering, "You were incredible, Tia. Simply incredible." Jaden waved the sign he'd made, its letters slightly smudged but still vibrant. "You killed it, sis," he shouted, bouncing with excitement. For the first time in months, Tia felt a deep sense of accomplishment. But as the euphoria of the performance began to fade, she realized that this victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt overlooked or dismissed. Back at Miss Chen's studio, Tia resumed her regular classes, but things felt different. The competition had changed her. Where once she had danced with caution, now she danced with a confidence that surprised even herself. Her movements were bolder, her expressions more vivid. She wasn't afraid to take up space anymore. Miss Chen noticed the transformation. "You've come a long way, Tia," she said one afternoon as they worked on a new routine. "But I think you're ready for the next step." Tia looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "There's an advanced workshop happening in the city," Miss Chen explained. "It's a chance to work with professional choreographers and learn alongside dancers from all over. I think it would be an amazing opportunity for you." The idea both excited and terrified Tia. She had only just begun to rebuild her confidence. The thought of putting herself in a room full of strangers, many of whom would undoubtedly be more experienced, made her stomach twist. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. Miss Chen smiled knowingly. "Growth happens outside of our comfort zones. You've already proven that you can rise to a challenge. Trust yourself." With her family's encouragement, Tia decided to apply for the workshop. The process was grueling. She had to submit a video audition showcasing her skills and write an essay about her journey as a dancer. Tia poured her heart into both, her story fueling every movement and every word. Weeks later, the acceptance email arrived. Tia stared at the screen, her heart racing as she read the words. "Congratulations, Tia Johnson. We're thrilled to invite you to this citywide dance intensive." Her family celebrated the news with a homemade dinner and a cake that read, "Our star dancer." Tia felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was a big step, and she wasn't sure what to expect. The workshop was held in a sprawling dance academy in the heart of the city. On the first day, Tia stepped into the lobby, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The room buzzed with energy as dancers warmed up and chatted in small groups. Tia felt a pang of nervousness as she scanned the crowd, her insecurities threatening to resurface. But then she remembered Miss Chen's words, "Growth happens outside of our comfort zones." Tia squared her shoulders and stepped into the studio. The first few days of the workshop were intense. The instructors pushed the dancers to their limits, introducing challenging combinations and intricate choreography. Tia struggled at first, her movements feeling clumsy compared to the polished precision of some of her peers. But she refused to let herself fall into the trap of self-doubt. Each night, she stayed late, practicing until her muscles ached. One evening, as Tia worked on a particularly difficult sequence, one of the instructors, a tall man named Mr. Rivera, approached her. "You've got fire in you, kid," he said, watching as she repeated the steps. "But you're holding back. Why?" Tia hesitated, unsure how to respond. Finally, she said, "I'm afraid of messing up." Mr. Rivera smiled. "Every great dancer messes up. That's how we learn. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Be afraid of not giving it your all." His words stayed with Tia, and the next day, she approached the routine with a newfound fearlessness. She stumbled, tripped, and even fell, but she kept going, pouring her heart into every movement. By the end of the day, her fellow dancers clapped for her during the final run-through, a gesture of respect and camaraderie. As the workshop progressed, Tia began to form connections with her peers. There was Sophia, a bubbly dancer from Texas who excelled at jazz, and Amir, a quiet but gifted contemporary dancer. They bonded over late-night practices and shared stories of their journeys. Tia realized that many of them had faced challenges similar to hers: body shaming, self-doubt, and the relentless pressure to conform. These conversations fueled Tia's resolve. She began to see herself not just as a dancer, but as part of a larger movement. Dance wasn't just about technique, it was about telling stories, breaking barriers, and creating change. On the final day of the workshop, the dancers were asked to perform solo routines they had choreographed themselves. Tia chose the routine she had performed at the regional competition, but added new elements to reflect her growth. As she stepped onto the stage, she felt the familiar surge of nerves, but this time, it was accompanied by a sense of purpose. The music began, and Tia moved with a raw, unfiltered energy. Her movements were a reflection of her journey. The pain of rejection, the struggle to find her place, and the triumph of reclaiming her voice. She danced not just for herself, but for every dancer who had ever been told they didn't belong. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Tears streamed down Tia's face as she took her bow. This wasn't just a performance. It was a declaration. She was here, she was worthy, and she wasn't going anywhere. After the workshop, Tia returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into her training, pushing her boundaries and exploring new styles of dance. But more importantly, she began to share her story, speaking at schools and dance studios about her experiences with body shaming and self-doubt. Taya's words resonated with dancers of all ages. Messages poured in from people who had seen her performances or heard her talks. Many thanked her for being a voice for those who felt invisible, while others shared their own struggles and triumphs. One day, Taya received an invitation to perform at a national dance showcase, a prestigious event featuring some of the most talented dancers in the country. The thought of dancing on such a grand stage was daunting, but Taya knew she was ready. As the showcase approached, Taya worked tirelessly to perfect her routine. Miss Chen and her family supported her every step of the way, cheering her on during late-night rehearsals and helping her prepare for the big day. On the night of the performance, as Taya stood backstage, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She thought about how far she had come. From the girl who had almost given up on dance to the young woman who had found her voice and her strength. When she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight illuminated her, and the audience fell silent. Taya took a deep breath, the music began, and she danced. Each movement was a testament to her journey, a story of resilience, courage, and the power of believing in oneself. When the final note faded, the audience rose to their feet, their applause thunderous. In that moment, Taya knew she had not only reclaimed her passion, but also inspired others to do the same. Dance had given her a voice, and she was determined to use it to break chains and build bridges. This was just the beginning. The ripple effect. The glow of the national showcase still lingered as Taya returned to her hometown, her heart full of pride and purpose. She had faced her fears, danced her story, and watched as her truth resonated with audiences in ways she had never imagined. Yet the journey she had embarked on felt far from over. The applause had validated her, but the real work was only beginning. Taya's performance had gone viral online, thanks to an attendee who had uploaded a recording to social media. Within days, her dance had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, and comments flooded in from around the world. "She's incredible. What a powerful story. I feel seen watching this. Thank you for sharing your journey." This is what dance should be about: emotion and authenticity, not just impossible standards. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, but it also brought with it a sense of responsibility. Taya realized that her story had struck a chord, not just within the dance community, but far beyond it. Her inbox was filled with messages from dancers who had faced similar struggles, parents seeking advice for their children, and teachers looking to create more inclusive environments in their studios. One message, however, stood out. It was from a dancer named Leela, a girl Taya's age from another state. The email read, "Hi Taya. I just wanted to say thank you. I saw your video, and it gave me the courage to speak up about what I've been going through. My dance teacher said I wasn't the right size for ballet, and for a long time, I believed her. But watching you made me realize that I don't have to fit into someone else's box to be a dancer. Thank you for inspiring me. With love, Leila." Taya's chest tightened as she read the message. It reminded her of her own struggles with Miss Thompson, and it reignited her determination to create change. With Miss Chen's guidance, Taya began to brainstorm ways to use her platform to make a difference. They decided to host a series of workshops at Miss Chen's studio, focusing on body positivity, resilience, and self-expression. The workshops would be open to dancers of all levels, emphasizing that dance was for everyone, regardless of their size, shape, or background. The planning process was intense. Taya worked tirelessly with Miss Chen and her family to organize the event, reaching out to local sponsors and spreading the word through social media. The response was overwhelming. Dancers from neighboring towns and even other states signed up, eager to be part of something transformative. On the day of the first workshop, the studio buzzed with energy. Dancers of all ages and body types filled the space, their excitement palpable. Taya stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding as she prepared to address the crowd. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit, but she knew this moment was bigger than her nerves. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm so glad you're here. Today isn't just about learning new steps or perfecting techniques. It's about celebrating who we are as dancers and as people." The crowd erupted into applause, and Tia felt a surge of confidence. She led the group through warm-ups and exercises designed to encourage creativity and self-expression. Miss Chen and other instructors assisted, offering guidance and support. The room was alive with laughter, movement, and a sense of camaraderie that transcended competition or critique. During a break, Tia sat with a group of young dancers who eagerly shared their stories. One girl, Maya, spoke about how she had been excluded from a performance because of her weight. Another, Ethan, talked about feeling out of place as a boy in ballet. Tia listened intently, her heart aching for their experiences, but also swelling with hope. "You're not alone," she told them. "And you don't have to change who you are to belong. Dance is about telling your story, and every story matters." The workshops became a monthly event, drawing more participants each time. Word spread, and soon local media began covering the initiative. Tia was invited to speak on radio shows and at schools, sharing her journey and advocating for inclusivity in the arts. Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about the need for change in the dance world. Meanwhile, Tia's old studio under Miss Thompson began to feel the ripple effects of her growing influence. Parents who had once accepted the studio's rigid standards began questioning its practices. Enrollment declined, and Miss Thompson found herself facing criticism for her outdated methods. One afternoon, as Tia prepared for a workshop, a familiar figure walked into the studio. Miss Thompson stood at the entrance, her posture stiff, but her expression uncertain. Tia froze, a mix of emotions swirling in her chest. She hadn't seen Miss Thompson since leaving her studio, and the memories of her harsh words still stung. Miss Chen approached Miss Thompson with a polite but guarded smile. "What brings you here?" she asked. "I'd like to speak with Tia," Miss Thompson replied, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Tia hesitated, then nodded. Miss Chen gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before stepping away. Miss Thompson took a deep breath. "Tia, I owe you an apology," she began. "I didn't realize the impact of my words at the time, but watching your journey has made me reflect on my actions. I was wrong to treat you the way I did." Tia studied her former teacher's face, searching for sincerity. She saw it in the way Miss Thompson's shoulders slumped and in the slight tremor in her voice. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Tia said honestly, "but I hope you'll take what you've learned and use it to help other dancers." Miss Thompson nodded, her eyes glistening. "I will. Thank you for showing me a better way." As Miss Thompson left, Tia felt a sense of closure. She had faced the person who had once made her doubt herself and emerged stronger. But her focus remained on the future. There was still so much work to be done. The workshops continued to grow, evolving into a movement that extended beyond the dance world. Tia began partnering with organizations that promoted mental health and body positivity, using dance as a tool for healing and empowerment. She received invitations to perform at events across the country, each stage a platform to share her message. One evening, as Tia prepared for a performance, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she didn't see imperfections or insecurities. She saw a leader, a storyteller, and a dancer who had found her voice. As the lights dimmed and the music began, Tia stepped onto the stage, her heart full of gratitude and determination. Her journey wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever felt unseen or unworthy. And as she danced, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. A legacy in motion. Tia stood backstage at the National Dance Convention, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone clipped to her blazer. The vast auditorium beyond the curtain buzzed with anticipation, filled with dancers, teachers, and advocates from across the country. It was the largest crowd she had ever spoken to, and her heart pounded with both excitement and nerves. At just 16 years old, Tia had become a household name in the dance community. Her workshops had grown into a nationwide initiative, and her story had inspired countless dancers to embrace their individuality. Today, she was the keynote speaker, addressing an audience of over 2,000 people. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the journey that had brought her here. The stage manager gave her a nod, and Tia stepped into the spotlight, greeted by thunderous applause. She paused, letting the energy of the room settle before beginning. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I want to start by saying that I'm not here because I'm perfect. I'm here because, for a long time, I believed I wasn't enough. I believed that my body, my talent, and my passion didn't fit into the mold of what a real dancer was supposed to be." The room fell silent as Tia shared her story. She spoke about her early love for dance, the harsh criticisms she endured, and the moment she nearly gave up. But she also spoke about finding her strength, about how the support of her family, Miss Chen's guidance, and her own determination had helped her reclaim her passion. "When I stepped onto that stage at the regional competition, I wasn't dancing to win," she said. "I was dancing to heal. And in doing so, I discovered something powerful. Dance is for everyone. It's not about fitting a standard. It's about breaking free of it." The audience erupted into applause, but Tia wasn't finished. "Today, I challenge all of you, dancers, teachers, judges, parents, to look at the ways we define talent and worth. Are we lifting people up, or are we boxing them in? Are we celebrating diversity, or are we enforcing conformity?" Tia's speech sparked a standing ovation, but the real work was happening beyond the applause. After her talk, she joined a panel discussion with industry leaders, pushing for changes in the way competitions were judged and studios were managed. She advocated for more inclusive practices, such as eliminating weight-based comments, diversifying representation in dance media, and creating safe spaces for dancers to express themselves. Her efforts didn't stop there. Tia partnered with mental health organizations to address the emotional toll of body shaming and perfectionism in competitive dance. She worked with costume designers to create pieces that celebrated all body types, and she collaborated with other dancers to choreograph routines that highlighted diversity and individuality. Back at home, Tia's workshops continued to flourish. One day, she received an email from Leela, the young dancer who had written to her after seeing her viral video. Leela had attended several of Tia's workshops and was now thriving at her own dance studio, where her teacher had embraced a more inclusive approach after hearing Tia speak. "I wanted you to know," Leela wrote, "that you've changed my life. I'm not afraid to take up space anymore, and I started helping younger dancers find their confidence too. Thank you for everything." Tia's eyes filled with tears as she read the message. It was a reminder of why she had started this journey, to create a ripple effect that would reach dancers she might never meet, changing the culture of dance for generations to come. The following year, Tia launched the Dance Beyond Limits Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting inclusivity and resilience in the arts. The foundation provided scholarships for underprivileged dancers, hosted body-positive workshops, and partnered with studios to implement new teaching methods. Miss Chen became a mentor within the foundation, guiding young instructors on how to create nurturing environments. Tia's family played an active role as well, with her mother organizing events and her father managing logistics. Even Jaden found his place, creating social media content that amplified the foundation's message. One of the foundation's biggest initiatives was a nationwide competition called Dance Your Truth. Unlike traditional competitions, this event focused on storytelling, creativity, and self-expression. Dancers of all levels were encouraged to participate, and the judging criteria emphasized individuality over perfection. The first Dance Your Truth competition drew participants from across the country, each one eager to share their unique stories through movement. Tia served as a guest judge, but she also took the stage to perform. Her routine was a tribute to her journey, weaving together the pain of her past, the joy of her present, and the hope she had for the future. As the competition grew, so did Tia's influence. She was invited to speak at international conferences, sharing her vision for a more inclusive dance world. She published a book titled Breaking Free, A Dancer's Journey to Self-Acceptance, which became a bestseller. Schools began using her story as part of their curriculum, teaching students about resilience, empathy, and the importance of embracing diversity. Through it all, Tia remained grounded. She continued to train and perform, finding new ways to challenge herself as an artist. But her greatest passion was mentoring young dancers. She saw herself in their wide eyes and tentative movements, and she made it her mission to ensure they never felt the isolation she once had. Years later, Tia stood in a different spotlight, this time at the grand opening of the Tia Johnson Center for Inclusive Arts. The center was a sprawling facility that housed dance studios, performance spaces, and counseling services. It was a place where dancers of all backgrounds could come to learn, grow, and heal. As Tia cut the ribbon, surrounded by her family, Miss Chen, and hundreds of supporters, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than a building. It was a legacy, a testament to the power of resilience and the belief that everyone deserves a place to shine. That night, as Tia sat in her office overlooking the bustling center, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the little girl who had fallen in love with dance, the teenager who had almost given up, and the young woman who had found her voice. She thought about Miss Thompson's harsh words and the way they had once haunted her. But now, those words held no power. Tia smiled as she opened an email from a young dancer who had just attended her workshop. The message was simple but heartfelt. "Thank you for showing me that I'm enough." With a deep breath, Tia leaned back in her chair. She knew her journey wasn't over. There were still barriers to break, stories to tell, and lives to touch. But for the first time, she allowed herself to savor the moment. She had turned her pain into purpose, her struggles into strength. And in doing so, she had created a world where every dancer could move freely, boldly, and unapologetically. This was her legacy, a legacy in motion. The movement expands. The Tia Johnson Center for Inclusive Arts was a vibrant hub of creativity and inspiration. Every corner buzzed with activity, dancers rehearsing routines in sunlit studios, children learning the basics of rhythm and balance, and instructors leading workshops on everything from contemporary dance to cultural styles like flamenco and baratonidium. The air was alive with music, laughter, and the rhythmic sounds of feet tapping on polished wooden floors. For Tia, this center wasn't just a building. It was the physical embodiment of a dream, one she had shared with countless people over the years. But she also knew it was only the beginning. The world of dance and the broader arts community still had far to go. One afternoon, as Tia prepared for a meeting in her office, her assistant knocked gently on the door. "Tia," she said, peeking inside. "You've got a visitor. She says it's urgent." Curious, Tia stood and walked to the reception area. A young girl, no older than 12, sat on a bench with her mother beside her. The girl's hands fidgeted in her lap, and her face was streaked with tears. When she looked up and saw Tia, her eyes widened in recognition. You're Tia Johnson," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. Tia crouched to meet her at eye level. "That's me," she said gently. "What's your name?" "Chloe," the girl replied, her voice barely audible. Tia smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Chloe. How can I help?" The girl's mother spoke up, her voice heavy with emotion. "Chloe loves to dance, but she was told by her instructor that she's not built for it. It crushed her. She wanted to give up, but then we found your videos and your story. She begged me to bring her here." Tia's heart ached as she listened, the memory of her own struggles rushing back. She turned to Chloe, her expression earnest. "You're already a dancer, Chloe, and no one has the right to tell you otherwise. Come with me. I want to show you something." Tia led Chloe and her mother to one of the center's larger studios, where a group of dancers rehearsed. They'd ranged in age, body type, and experience, their movements uniquely their own yet harmonious. Taya waved them over and introduced Chloe. "This is Chloe," she said. "She's a dancer, just like all of you." The group welcomed Chloe warmly, inviting her to join their practice. At first, Chloe hesitated, her shoulders hunched with uncertainty. But with gentle encouragement, she stepped onto the floor. Taya watched as the girl's initial shyness melted away, replaced by a tentative confidence. Her movements were raw and unpolished, but they were filled with emotion and determination. By the end of the session, Chloe was beaming, her earlier tears replaced by a radiant smile. Her mother hugged Taya tightly, whispering, "Thank you." Tia shook her head. "This is what we're here for." The experience with Chloe reignited Taya's drive to expand the center's reach. She envisioned satellite programs in underserved communities, mobile workshops that could travel to rural areas, and partnerships with schools to integrate dance into their curricula. She called a meeting with her team to brainstorm ideas. "We've made incredible progress," Taya said, addressing the group. "But there are still so many dancers out there who don't have access to spaces like this. How can we bring the movement to them?" Ideas poured in, hosting pop-up classes in parks, offering scholarships for online dance programs, and creating a video series that featured diverse dancers sharing their stories. Taya's excitement grew as the possibilities unfolded. One team member, a choreographer named Samira, suggested reaching out to cultural organizations. "Dance is such a universal language," she said. "Let's collaborate with communities that have their own rich traditions. We can learn from them and share their stories with the world." Tia loved the idea. "Yes," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Let's make this movement about connecting, not just changing." Over the next year, the Dance Beyond Limits Foundation expanded its initiatives. Taya and her team traveled across the country, hosting workshops in community centers, schools, and even outdoor spaces. They partnered with local artists to celebrate cultural diversity and highlight the unique ways dance was expressed in different communities. One memorable collaboration was with a Native American dance troupe. Taya and her team spent weeks learning about the history and significance of their dances, culminating in a joint performance that blended traditional and contemporary styles. The event drew a massive crowd, sparking conversations about the importance of preserving cultural heritage while embracing innovation. Another project took Tia overseas, where she worked with a group of refugee children in Europe. Many of the children had faced unimaginable hardships, but through dance, they found a way to express themselves and heal. Taya returned from the experience deeply moved and more committed than ever to using dance as a force for good. As the movement grew, so did its challenges. There were critics who dismissed Taya's efforts, arguing that she was diluting the art of dance by promoting inclusivity over technical excellence. Some traditionalists in the dance world resisted the changes, clinging to outdated standards and methods. Taya faced the criticism head-on. "Dance has always been about storytelling," she said in interviews and speeches, "and stories come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. By embracing diversity, we're not weakening dance, we're strengthening it." Her words resonated with many, and her growing base of supporters rallied around her. Social media campaigns like #DanceYourTruth and #AllBodyScandance gained traction, spreading her message to millions. One evening, Taya received an invitation to return to her old studio, the one run by Miss Thompson. The invitation was unexpected, and Tia hesitated. She hadn't been back since leaving years earlier, and the memories were still raw. But after some thought, she decided to go. When she arrived, she was surprised to find the studio transformed. The rigid atmosphere she remembered had softened, replaced by a sense of openness. Miss Thompson greeted her with a nervous smile. "Tia," she said, her voice hesitant, "thank you for coming." Tia nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've been following your work," Miss Thompson said. "It's made me realize how much I need to change, not just as a teacher, but as a person. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, and I want to do better." Tia studied her former teacher, searching for sincerity. She saw it in the way Miss Thompson's eyes glistened, in the slight tremor of her hands. Finally, she said, "It's not too late to change, and if you need help, I'm here." The visit marked a turning point for Tia. It reminded her that change wasn't always easy, but it was possible. And as she continued her work, she saw the ripples of her efforts spreading further and further. Years later, Tia stood at the grand opening of the Global Dance Collective, an international network of inclusive dance centers inspired by her foundation. Leaders from around the world gathered to celebrate, many of them dancers who had been inspired by Tia's journey. As she looked out at the crowd, Tia felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She thought about Chloe, Leela, Miss Chen, her family, and even Miss Thompson. Each of them had shaped her story, just as she had shaped theirs. When it was her turn to speak, Tia stepped up to the podium. "This isn't just my story," she said, her voice steady. "It's our story. And together, we're creating a world where everyone can dance their truth." The audience erupted into applause, but Tia wasn't thinking about the noise. She was thinking about the little girl she had once been, the one who had doubted her worth but never stopped dancing. This was her legacy, and it was only just beginning.